Greetings, dear listeners. Hope you're all doing well. We're out here tonight to welcome the arrival of the full snow moon. He's just coming up over the horizon, the full snow moon of February the 5th, 2023. And while the lovely and talented camera crew is giving us a panorama shot of tonight's aptly named full snow moon in our snowy landscape, I'm going to be telling you the story of one of the most infamous werewolves of the Middle Ages, Jean Grenier. Jean Grenier. So, stay tuned. Jean Grenier, adapted from the Book of Werewolves by the Reverend Sabine Baring-Gould. One fine afternoon in the spring, some village girls were tending their sheep on the sand dunes which intervene between the sea and the vast forests of pine covering the greater portion of the present department of Landes in the south of France. The brightness of the sky, the freshness of the air puffing up off the blue twinkling Bay of Biscay, the hum of the wind as it made rich music among the pines, which stood like a green uplifted wave on the east, the beauty of the sandhills, the charm of the forest skirts, tinted variously with the foliage of cork trees, pines, and acacia, all conspired to fill the peasant maidens with joy, and to make their voices rise in song and laughter, which rang merrily over the hills and through the dark avenues of evergreen trees. Now a gorgeous butterfly attracted their attention, then a flight of quails. But what is the matter with the sheep?" said Jean. She spoke because the sheep, which had been quietly browsing before her, had started away as though frightened at something. At the same time, one of the dogs began to growl and show its fangs. The girls ran to the spot and saw, sitting on a log, a boy of 13. His appearance was peculiar. Hair, tawny red and thickly matted, fell over his shoulders and completely covered his narrow brow. His small, pale gray eyes twinkled with an expression of horrible ferocity and cunning, while his complexion was of a dark olive color. His teeth were strong and white, the canine teeth protruding over the lower lip when the mouth was closed. The boy's hands were large and powerful, the nails black and pointed like talons. He was poorly dressed and seemed to be in the most abject poverty. The few garments he wore were in tatters, and through the rents the emaciation of his limbs was plainly visible. The girls stood around him, half frightened and much surprised. But the boy showed no symptoms of astonishment. Instead, his face relaxed into a gruesome leer, which showed the whole range of his glittering white fangs. "Well, my maidens," said he in a harsh voice, "which of you is the prettiest, I should like to know? Can you decide among you?" "What do you want to know for?" asked Joan, the eldest of the girls, aged 18, who took upon herself to be spokesman for the rest. Because I shall marry the prettiest," was the answer. "Ah," said Joan jokingly, "that is if she will have you, which is not very likely, as we none of us know you or anything about you." "I wear a wolf skin sometimes," replied the boy. "A wolf skin?" echoed the girl. "And pray, Who gave it to you? One called Pierre Labarant. There is no man of that name hereabouts. Where does he live? A scream of laughter, mingled with howls, came from the strange boy. The girls recoiled, and the youngest took refuge behind Joan. Do you want to know Pierre Labarant, lass? Hey, he is a man with an iron chain about his neck, which he is ever engaged in gnawing. Do you want to know where he lives, lass? Ha! In a place of gloom and fire, where there are many companions, some seated in iron chairs, burning, others stretched on glowing beds, burning too. Some cast men upon blazing coals, others roast men before fierce flames, and others plunge them into cauldrons of liquid fire. The girls trembled and looked at each other with scared faces, and then looked again at the hideous young man who crouched before them. You want to know about the wolfskin cape, lass? He continued. Pierre Labarant gave it to me. He wraps it round me, and every Monday, Friday, and Sunday, and for an hour at dusk every other day, I am a wolf, a werewolf. I have killed dogs and drunk their blood, but little girls taste better. Their flesh is tender and sweet, their blood rich and warm. I have eaten many a maiden, as I have been on raids with my 9 companions. I am a werewolf. Ha! If the sun were to set, I would soon fall on one of you and make a meal of you. Again he burst into frightful laughter, and the girls, unable to endure it any longer, fled. The scene you have just listened to is my abridged adaptation of the opening section of the Reverend Sabine Baring-Gould's chapter on Jean Grenier in his 1865 book, The Book of Werewolves. It is an evocative reimagining of an encounter between the supposed werewolf and some shepherd girls, and reads just like a Victorian or Edwardian ghost story, which is exactly what it is. I've put a link to it in the description. Still, Jean Grenier was a real person. He tended sheep with a 13-year-old girl, Marguerite Poirier, who had often complained of Jean's horrible stories about eating dogs and human flesh. But her concerns were ignored until the day she came home terribly frightened, her clothes badly torn, claiming she had been attacked by a werewolf with reddish fur and a stumpy tail. A werewolf who she said was Jean Grenier. As several area children had disappeared, Grenier was arrested and brought before the Parliament of Bordeaux, where it was established that he had murdered and eaten several children. Grenier claimed a mysterious lord of the forest had given him both a magic ointment and a wolfskin, with which he could transform himself into a werewolf. But the court rejected the idea of witchcraft and of lycanthropy, believing that part of the case was all in Grenier's diseased mind. Instead, due to Grenier's age, low intelligence, and physical neglect, the court showed remarkable leniency for the time, 1603, and sentenced him to life imprisonment in a monastery at Bordeaux, with any escape punishable by death. 7 years later, a visitor found Grenier, quote, diminutive in stature, very shy, and unwilling to look anyone in the face. His eyes were deep-set and restless, his teeth long and protruding, his nails black and in places worn away. His mind was completely barren. He seemed unable to comprehend the smallest things. End of quote. he still claimed to have really been a werewolf and said he still had a desire to eat human flesh. He said the Lord of the Forest had twice appeared to him, but that he had driven him off by making the sign of the cross. Grenier passed away soon after this interview, aged 20. In his book Werewolves, Elliott O'Donnell gives a rather different version of the case, a version full of black humor, such as the following remarks said to have taken place during Grenier's trial. Quote, "One old woman, he said, whom he found alone in a cottage, showed extraordinary agility in trying to escape. She raced round tables, clambered over chairs, crawled under a bed, and finally hid in a cupboard and held the door so fast that he had to exert all his force to open it. And then," he added, "in spite of all my trouble, she proved to be as tough as leather." And he made a grimace that provoked much laughter. End of quote. Another detailed account, which says that Grenier was imprisoned in the Franciscan friary of St. Michael the Archangel at Bordeaux, can be found in Montague Summers' The Werewolf in Lore and Legend, which fleshes out many of the points we have been discussing. There is a link to the text in the description. But what do you think, dear listeners? Was Jean Grenier really a werewolf? Did he really have an ointment and a wolfskin that he could use to become a werewolf? Was he really in league with the devil, with the Lord of the Forest? Or was he a serial killer? Or was it all an hallucination of his rather dim mind? Please share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, Werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,500 subs. Till midnight. Cheers. Video in today's presentation is courtesy of Dr. Curious, while the music is the classic Ghost Processional by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod. And I must apologize for my gravelly voice today. I probably sound like Jean Grenier. Next thing you guys will be thinking I've got an ointment and a wolfskin at home. Well, if I do, I'll never tell.